p.m. We're going to get started in 5 minutes, so if you guys want to just grab a drink and your last bite to eat and take a seat, we'll get ready for the summit proceedings of the afternoon. If Jamie Liu is in the room, could you please come to the front to seek Claire Daly? Thank you very much. We'll be ready in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please take your seats, we're going to get ready for the afternoon proceedings. Good afternoon again. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Judging by the lack of food at the back of the room, I would say that everyone enjoyed all of the food. Luckily enough, we have a coffee break coming up after this panel, and then there's a reception at the end of the day where we're going to have a large range of appetizers where you guys can eat and have a drink and mingle, socialize, and network with each other. So this represents, I guess, the half point of the day. This morning, obviously, just an hour ago, we were fortunate enough to have two excellent panels which focus on international law and domestic compliance, and we were also fortunate enough to have a range of insights from those directly affected by statelessness, including, of course, Donovan and Kia and Deepan, who could not join us today. In particular, mobilization at the community level is so incredibly important, as we can see today, in both bringing attention to the issue of statelessness, but also in understanding the impact that statelessness has right here in this country and in our communities. Without the tireless work of community activists and mobilizers, we would not be able to be where we are today. The next panel is fitting, since it features insights from individuals and organizations that have been actively involved in supporting individuals who are or were stateless in Canada. This discussion will shed light onto non-state concepts of belonging and rights that provide the basis of Indigenous relationships and notions of territory. This afternoon, chairing this panel is Dr. Stacey Douglas. Dr. Douglas is an associate professor at the Department of Law and Legal Studies at Carleton University. Her interests in law and legal studies are fueled, of course, by broad interests about theories of democracy, the role of the state, and the relationships between the governed and the government. And further to that, the processes of decolonization. Please welcome me in introducing our presenters and chair, Dr. Stacey Douglas, Mr. Don Chapman, Dr. Marcelo Vargas, and Ms. Jocelyn King. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Josh, again, for that introduction, and thanks to all of you again for sticking around. Of course, you're going to stick around. It's a fascinating conference so far, thanks to the organizers. We've done a wonderful job of bringing so many great people together. I just had a wonderful lunch talking with lots of interesting people about very important issues. This panel that you're about to hear features insights, it features insight from individuals and organizations that have been actively involved in supporting individuals who are or were stateless in Canada. I have three panelists before me. We're going to go in order of Jocelyn Kane first, then followed by Marcelo Saavedra-Vargas, and then finally from Don Chapman. So I'm going to just briefly introduce Jocelyn Kane. Ms. Kane is the director of the Canadian Centre on Statelessness, or CCS. CCS is a non-profit organization that seeks action against statelessness through research, advocacy, and the fostering of a national community of allies, including persons affected by statelessness. Jocelyn.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, again, for attending today and allowing me to talk to you about what CCS does, what we do, where we work, who we work with, and what our goals are. My background, my personal, professional background is in the immigration and settlement sector, and I worked in Toronto in that sector for quite some time, and it became very clear throughout my career that there was a gap with respect to statelessness, as we all know at this point, with respect to legislation, policy, service provision, ground level frontline work. And I thought that there needed to be an attempt to address those issues in an organizational fashion. And so I had attended an OPIRG talk at the University of Ottawa with Deepan Buddhakoti, the gentleman who we heard on the audio clip in the last panel. And Deepan spoke about his statelessness experience. And at the end of the talk, I stood up and I asked everyone who in the room is doing research on these issues, who are the advocates, who are the players. And to be honest with you, it was just crickets. Nobody knew a thing. Nobody had any answers. And everybody was asking the same question. And in fact, after the talk, a few people had come up to me and said, you know, we're really thankful that you asked that question, and we're wondering the same thing. So in the year prior to November of 2014, I went on a series of interviews with executive directors of all sorts of immigration and settlement agencies in Toronto, which is really fun. And I asked them about statelessness. I asked them what they knew about statelessness. I asked them what they thought should be done about statelessness, who was working on these issues, and most importantly, whether there should be an organization created that is dedicated to these issues. And overwhelmingly, the response was, yes, do it, and you have no choice. And then I presented at the inaugural Global Forum on Statelessness in The Hague in September of 2014. And I presented actually my master's thesis, but then at the end of my presentation, I had one slide with my website, statelessness.ca. And I said to everybody in the room, you know, I'm thinking about creating this organization, so I haven't made up my mind yet, so let me know what you think. And the crowd in The Hague was, again, extremely supportive and motivating, and said that you have to do this. And in fact, one gentleman in The Hague had said that in the 8 years that he's been working on statelessness issues, he had never known anyone from Canada to be involved. And regardless if there were people in Canada doing that work and they just weren't recognized or acknowledged, the fact that he could say that in 8 years he didn't know of anyone, that really spoke to me. So I launched in November of 2014, and we started as a website only. CCS provides a space for people to learn about statelessness in the global and Canadian contexts. We advocate for policy and legislative change. And our goals are, and I'm so happy to hear from many of you in this room, I think our goals are all the same, and that is a reformed or brand new, in fact, Citizenship Act that does not create statelessness in any way, and also a reformed IRPA, this Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, that both that protects stateless persons in Canada. There are 3 pillars to the organization. The first is building a national community of allies. And to be honest, this room is kind of the first manifestation of that, and that is so very exciting. It's important for legal practitioners, researchers, activists, individuals, community members, stateless persons, policymakers, bureaucrats, everyone, everyone across the country to know what is going on in the other provinces and territories. So, you know, Donovan is in Yukon. What is happening with his case in Yukon that a legal practitioner, for example, in New Brunswick can learn from? Can they connect? Can they discuss issues and collaborate potentially? You know, joining different or facilitating relationships between different researchers at universities across the country. That kind of thing. The second pillar is research. So I like to think of us as a baby think tank. We hope to produce, carry out and produce high quality research that influences legislative and policy change. And I think we all can bet that any legislative and policy change in this country, at least in the last little bit, and definitely moving forward, heavily relies on quality research. I don't think that we are going to get a new Citizenship Act or a new IRPA without solid research on the social analysis of the challenges of statelessness, of the legal challenges of statelessness. So that is one of the endeavors that we seek to carry out. The third is perhaps most importantly, and that is engage and empower, and that is for everyone, for the groups I mentioned previously, legal practitioners, researchers, activists, government, the general public, but also stateless persons. I'm not stateless. I cannot tell Donovan's story. I cannot tell Kia's story. None of us in this room can. Only they can tell their own stories. And so what CCS stands for is to empower or work towards empowering stateless individuals to use their own voices and overcome those challenges in getting their stories out, and if they want to, and mobilizing their situations. And then, yeah, and I to be honest, I consider stateless. We have a board of directors, so I have 4 bosses, but I consider stateless persons my bosses. You know, like I work for you guys. So we launched in 2014, and we became an incorporated not-for-profit organization in November of 2015. We have 1 class of voters, 1 class of membership, which means that everybody is equal under not the eyes of the law, but the eyes of the law of the CCS. We are having our AGM in November of this year, and it's probably going to be in Toronto. So we are a member of the Americas Network on Nationality and Statelessness. We are the Canadian contingent, or the Canadian rep. The Americas Network on Nationality and Statelessness is a regional network that hopes to do much of the same work, I think, that we're trying to do in Canada, but expand that to the hemisphere and work with organizations in all of the Americas. And we sit on the steering committee, so we have a really a great role within that organization to see how capacity building initiatives are carried out. We also are a coalition member of the Global Campaign for Equal Nationality Rights. Did I say that right? Yes, I did say that right. And the Global Campaign seeks to mobilize issues and work with parliamentarians in addressing inequalities in gender nationality law. And that is something that is a huge problem with respect to statelessness, especially women and children. And the fact that the Global Campaign works with parliamentarians, I'm hoping to take lessons from their work that they carry out all over the world and bring that home so that we have a template, so to speak, to work with our own parliamentarians. So on to research. We have quite a few studies ongoing at CCS, which keep us very busy. The first is a data collection study on the practices of 4 government agencies with respect to their data collection practices on stateless persons. And myself and Patrick Palazzo will be presenting that in the next panel. We also worked this year on a category by legislation study. Myself and Terene is presenting that today at 6:15, I think, in the reception. And so I'm not sure what, Don, you're going to be speaking about, but I remember speaking with Don very early on, and he would say, and I would say, who exactly is stateless in Canada? And he would say, war brides, military brats, border babies, Canada's home children, butterbox babies, C-24, and all these different groups. And I would say, look, I've got to wrap my head around this. Michelle, you said that citizenship legislation is confusing, and it is confusing. So what we attempted to do was grab the text, grab those actual acts, and take the text that refers to citizenship and statelessness and place that on our website in the hopes that we can empower the public and empower all of us in this room to actually understand what does legislation say. And if it is this convoluted mess of abstract, refer to section A and F and I, and then so be it. At least it's on the site and people have access to that information. So that's what we worked on. I'm kind of stealing your thunder, Terene, I'm sorry. Another study that we looked at last year was an analysis, a comparative analysis of these statelessness determination procedures for 6 countries in the world: the UK, France, Australia, Spain, Belgium, and Georgia. And we looked at their statelessness determination procedures with the hopes to make recommendations for Canada to adopt its own statelessness determination procedures. That's ongoing, and that, I believe, will be published in the coming weeks, I hope. And a fourth study that we looked at is what we call the legal repository. And we attempted to collect information on stateless individuals in Canada that was publicly available and put it all in one spot. And so that, again, to empower the public to learn about who exactly is stateless, what are the conditions that affect their statelessness. And 2 things that we wanted to do specifically was to identify the legal rationale for the decisions made in their cases, as well as arguments made, so that legal practitioners could have a resource, an online resource that they could access right away. And the second thing is we wanted to identify trends and thematic areas with respect to that social analysis part: gender, criminality, country of origin, whether the person is a stateless refugee or a non-stateless refugee. And that is ongoing. And the 5th isn't really a study in itself, but part of our mandate is to understand what is happening across the country. And so we are constantly connecting with people all over the country and learning about what exactly they are doing in Winnipeg with respect to human rights. What are the seminars that are being offered in Fredericton with respect to citizenship acquisition, and then publish that on the site. What do we have planned for the future? So we were thinking about mobilizing knowledge, and how do we make people more aware of these issues so that people get it and people talk about this at the dinner table. And we thought about going into schools and having a presentation series in grade schools across, for now, Toronto, because that's where we're based. Also secondary schools and post-secondary schools, and just having a conversation with students and youth and talking about issues like statelessness, citizenship, birth registration, access. You know, things along these lines are being taught in schools, but I think that there's room to get a little bit more specific, if you will, with respect to this issue. We're also thinking about holding a seminar or webinar series that would serve to connect allies across the country. So instead of doing one presentation on birth registration, for example, we hold a seminar series that discusses the 10 different aspects of birth registration. Healthcare access, travel, all that kind of stuff. So we're thinking about that. So if anyone in this room wants to participate, please let us know. The third thing that we've got underway is something that we're so proud of and thrilled to be a part of, and that is a partnership with the University of Ottawa and OPIRG and a research study called Mapping Statelessness in Canada, and we'll be discussing that in the next panel as well, so I won't go into that. And then with respect to the global context and the plans that we all have, the I Belong campaign, the 30th anniversary of the Cartagena Declaration, I believe it's called, was held in Brazil on December 28th of 2014, and 28 countries participated in the Americas, and they came together and created what's called the Brazil Plan of Action, and they all pledged to commit to eradicating statelessness in their countries within the 10 years, so by 2024. Canada, I was not present at that meeting, so we have not promised to eradicate statelessness, but in any case, I think that being a part of the Americas is considered the most likely region, the most plausible region in the world to eradicate statelessness within or by 2024, and I think that we have a serious role to play in that commitment. And so we'll be continuing to work with our partner agencies in the Americas and learn from research initiatives that they carry out, capacity building initiatives that they carry out, and learning Spanish as well. That's it. That's all I've got. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Jocelyn. Next, we are going to hear from Dr. Marcelo Saavedra-Vargas, who is an elder from Quechuan Aymara Nation living on Algonquin land. He's been teaching at the University of Ottawa for 8 years in Indigenous Studies, History, International Development, and Political Science. Formerly, he was researcher for the North-South Institute and IDRC, and now works for OPIRG.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here with you. I'm going to talk here from the perspective of indigenous peoples. I am an Indian myself, from the Abya Yala, modernly called Latin America.